Today, on behalf of the city,
24-year-old Dion Patterson was captured just northwest of Atlanta. His mother says Patterson is a former Coast Guardsman who had some mental instability after taking some VA-prescribed meds. The Manhattan DA may file charges against a U.S. Marine for the chokehold death of a man acting erratically in the subway.
The incident involved a U.S. Marine putting Jordan Neely in a headlock after Neely had allegedly been screaming in an aggressive manner. The cause of death was compression of the neck. A group of protesters gathered to call for the Marine to be arrested. New York City Mayor Eric Adams said he is monitoring this latest case of violence on the city's subways.
We cannot just blatantly say what a passenger should or should not do in a situation like that. We should allow the investigation to take its course.
Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office is investigating the death.
Fox's Mike Emanuel. The New York Post reports Neely's aunt says he sank into a deep depression after his stepfather brutally murdered his mother. The Federal Reserve raises interest rates by a 1/4 percentage point, the 10th rate hike since March as it tries to tame inflation.
The raise will make it even more expensive for people to get loans, to buy big-ticket items like homes, and for businesses to expand. Inflation peaked last summer at 9%, but has been painfully high for 2 years, destabilizing the banking industry.
Fox's Caroline Shively concerns there may be more rate hikes ahead, sent the Dow down 270 points. America's listening to Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
A government report shows a massive spike in the deaths involving fentanyl.
A new report from the CDC shows that overdose deaths in the U.S. involving fentanyl spiked nearly 280% from 2016 to 2021. Fentanyl-involved overdoses outpaced people dying from cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and oxycodone. Over the past year, the Drug Enforcement Administration has sought to popularize the idea that one pill can kill, as there is growing bipartisan pressure for the White House to do more in confronting drug cartels smuggling it across the nation's southern border. The drug is now responsible for one death every 8 minutes. Sean Langell, Fox News.
Prosecutors in Colorado charged 3 teens with the first-degree murder of a woman who was hit by a large rock thrown at her passing car. A Texas Democratic congressman announces he's running for Ted Cruz's U.S. Senate seat.
Former NFL linebacker turned attorney and Democratic Texas Rep Colin Allred releasing a video announcement that he's running next year against 2-term Republican incumbent Senator Ted Cruz.
Some people say a Democrat can't win in Texas. Well, someone like me was never supposed to get this far. I've taken down a lot tougher guys than Ted Cruz. So let's get on the field and find out.
Allred is now in his 3rd term representing Dallas, acknowledging that he faces an uphill battle in Texas that hasn't had a Democratic senator since 1994. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The Labor Department levels fines against the owners of 3 McDonald's franchises in Louisville, Kentucky. The department claims 2 10-year-olds were among the 300 children who worked at the restaurants with little or no pay. One of the franchise owners says in a statement, the 10-year-olds were just visiting a parent on the night shift. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they will continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $4,100 by calling Family Finance in Hagåtña at 671-475-4545, Upper Tumon 671-647-5626, or in Dededo 671-633-4473.
Express yourself into the groove. The Guam Chamber of Commerce celebrates its 99th anniversary at the Dusatani Resort on May 6th with the theme of Madonna's Vogue. The Chamber's membership includes many corporations, large and small, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. Members play a key part in making Guam a star-bright place to live, work, and play. Let's congratulate the Guam Chamber of Commerce and its members on celebrating its 99th anniversary.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You agree, Jose?
Absolutely, 100%.
I thought you would. So we go from here to Zemi Ikotni. Now, you'll recall that Zemi Ikotni used to be a really important feature of this show. Back in the days when both newspapers were doing editorials. The Post gave up editorials about 5 months ago, the Daily News about 5 days ago. So we don't have editorials anymore, but I'm always on the lookout for something that I could use in place of an editorial, something that states a sentiment that a newspaper editor ought to be stating. Were he paying attention to the market that he's attempting to sell his newspapers to? And I've got one today that I'm going to turn over to my faithful sidekick here, none other than Jose Martinez. So tell us about it, Jose.
This one comes from townhall.com, a pretty good conglomerate of different opinion writers. It's titled The Enormous Cognitive Dissonance Within the Dems' Minimum Wage Agenda, written by Matt Vespa. I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, he's a good writer. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool last name.
Yeah, especially late in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah, Vespa.
Vespa, yeah.
That's Italian, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
So anyways, he starts off by going, the Wall Street Journal's recent notable and quotable will probably send ripples through liberal America if they read it. It's about the minimum wage, another pet project of the left, which ironically has accelerated businesses automating the tasks once performed by humans to cut costs. Like on the abortion issue, Democrats are laser focused on creating an economy with a so-called living wage. What that figure is remains entirely subjective. We have proposals for $15 an hour, while some soar in the 20s per hour. The data is clear that raising the wage hurts workers and businesses, but we'll rehash that later. When Michael Munger of the American Institute for Economic Research posted in the Journal is an answer to two simple questions. One, how many workers in America work in minimum wage jobs? And two, where does that put them regarding world income distribution? Munger teaches undergraduate political economy. He's very open about it. And answer to question one is fewer than 2%. And those workers fall within the top fifth of world income distribution, which, as he puts it, creates enormous cognitive dissonance. I get answers to the first question ranging from 20% to 40%, and the correct answer is fewer than 2%. The answers to the second question are usually around 20%. The correct answer is above 85%. It quickly gets real quiet in the auditorium. All through high school, the kids have earnestly been told that poverty should be defined in relative terms and that the U.S. system is cruel to the poor. The fact that a minimum wage job puts you in the top fifth of the world income distribution and that 98% of Americans make more than minimum wage creates enormous cognitive dissonance. As our own Guy Benson aptly noted, it's because we're a wealthy country. Minimum wage jobs aren't meant to be careers, and you can see why this issue hasn't really gone anywhere since it's been tried at the local level. Also, with fewer than 2% of workers falling in this category, it's not a majority issue. Also, as we've learned, minimum wage workers are already living in the living wage category compared to most of the world. In Seattle and New York, two cities that experimented with increasing the minimum wage, all it did was wreck the service industry. New York lost at least 1,000 restaurants. Workers saw their hours cut, which meant they made less money in the long term. Even self-identified progressives in Seattle, which had a phased-in minimum wage hike, saw the impact of this policy. It's a job killer.
Very good, Jose. So I wanted Jose to read that because it's a precursor to the testimony that I plan on giving to Roy Kanata's hearing. Actually, I guess you'd call it a sensing session. Because he's concerned about the minimum wage and he wants to get input from stakeholders, which I suspect means Ron McNinch will be there, the prime stakeholder of stakeholders, right?
Oh, I thought you meant burger holders.
Yeah, well, it's beef. Yeah, if you go to that hearing, you will not find anybody standing in the middle of the room hollering, "Where's the beef?" Yeah, so I'm going to go, and I've got my testimony prepared. So I'm going to do, I don't know if it's going to be a real huge favor for Roy or a terrible disservice to him, because if you want to hear my testimony, I'm hoping that I get the chance. It starts at 2. I'm hoping I get a chance that I can read my testimony before the show starts. And so if you want to kind of like a double dose of tall tales, tune into Roy's hearing tomorrow. And I don't know if that'll help him or hurt him. I suspect
it'll help the viewership.
It'll help the viewership and hurt Roy's quest to raise the minimum wage, because, you got to feel sorry for people. If you don't really feel sorry for people that don't have much money, why would you want to run for the legislature? So I'm going to pick up on those two figures, the fact that less than 2% of the people in the United States are working for the minimum wage. And that working for the minimum wage in the United States puts you in the top fifth of income recipients in the entire world. So it can't be all that bad, right?
And I'm always curious on this living wage, why it's never defined. Who gets to choose what a living wage means? Is that bare minimum? Is that only bread and water for your meals? Is that no cable TV? Who defines that?
I have the definition for that. Yeah, here's the definition. To each according to his needs, from each according to his abilities. So we've known what a living wage was since about 1870, when Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, because that's what it's all about. You got to give people enough for their needs, During the Obama administration, that meant that if you couldn't afford a cell phone, the government would give you a cell phone. Because you need to have a cell phone, right?
They called it the Obama phone.
Exactly. And in a lot of American cities now, the city governments are furnishing drug paraphernalia needles and pipes and tourniquets and all those sorts of things. So that's kind of what it gets down to. Concepts like individual initiative, freedom, liberty, not so much anymore. Not when the left is in charge. Anyhow, that's that. The column that Jose just read is a precursor to my testimony before Roy's committee tomorrow. Okay, let's see what we've got on the card for today. We've got GVB versus the Carl and Joe Mack. And we're going to go on with Tim and Tall Tales versus Fisher, Calamity, on and on and on. That same old story. And then I may have some time to work on Enriquez versus Okada versus Quisenberry. My thoughts about who should be the next president of the University of Guam. So we'll just see how it goes. Now, I spent some time on this already, and I called your attention, I think I called your attention, the fact that the board of directors of the Visitors Bureau, I think, is meeting tomorrow. And 2 items on the agenda. Item number 4, action by the board, resolution, search for management, and RFP for legal counsel. Management, of course, means the Carl. Legal counsel means Joe Mack, full name Joe McDonald, not the guy that had the farm. He's from a law firm named McDonald Law Firm, Joe McDonald and Charles McDonald. And, of course, everybody knows Naan McDonald, Chamorro Na'inatnya, Chamorro Ina'anyeha. It's a very prominent Chamorro name. Even one of our governors was a McDonald, Paul McDonald Calvo. So it's not, Klitzkie just doesn't quite fill the bill on that, right? Maybe I'll change, since it's so easy to change everything nowadays, maybe I should have a real Chamorro name. So maybe I should change my name from Klitzkie to McDonald. McKlitzkie, yeah, or Old Klitzkie.
Old Klitzkie.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's a timeline. And I'm going to go through the timeline. We've covered a lot of these things, but this is a nice summary that shows you where we start and brings you up to date on where we are. The Visitors Bureau Board of Directors, a body composed mainly of the island's top tourism, airline, and banking interests. Guess which bank, Jose?
If I were to guess, I'd probably be getting the right one.
Uh-huh.
It boggles my mind.
Yeah. Believe that Carl Gutierrez was doing an excellent job as GVB president and CEO until the day he publicly accused some of them of corruption. You remember that happened like May last year. He came out and he said, these guys are violating the open government law and they're self-dealing. These guys who are board members who are in the travel or hotel industry are using the government's back scratcher to scratch their own backs. And you know that on Tall Tales, it's not a cardinal sin, but it's pretty bad. So the article goes on to say, now those interests want him gone. And they also want to get rid of legal counsel, former chief prosecutor Joseph McDonald, who compiled a report of his investigation validating Gutierrez's claims. I've read his report. I've read his analysis of the board of the bylaws versus the statute. And as one lawyer looking at another lawyer's work, I give him an A on his work. He did a fine job, very lawyer-like, very thorough. It's not about Joe McDonald. It's not about what Joe McDonald thinks. He didn't insert himself into it. It was if Joe Friday had ever gone to law school instead of being a cop, it would have been the law, ma'am, just the law. The investigative report is scathing and includes financial ledgers, board meeting minutes, incorporation documents, emails, and more to back up its allegations of a criminal conspiracy to defraud the government of Guam of millions of dollars in public tax dollars. Just last week, the board made its latest attempt to silence and be rid of Gutierrez and McDonald. Here is a non-exhaustive timeline of the major events that led us to this point. March 2022, the accusations start. Gutierrez begins making public statements on talk radio, primarily on the Ray Gibson show, 93.3 FM, The Point, that suggests his knowledge of corruption among certain board members. Yeah, good for The Point, good for Ray Gibson, you know, and you can bet that when it comes to rooting out things like that, we got The Point and we got Jungle Watch. And certainly we have Candid News with Troy Torres. The others, not so much. March 25, the gloves come off at a board meeting. Then GVB chairman Milton Morinaga, who also was the head of the hotel conglomerate PHR Ken Corporation, raised Gutierrez's public comments and began to admonish him. Now, Doug Moylan, I think, laid out the rules of admonishment. I used to think that if you spotted conduct that required an admonishment, every person living on this island, in fact, living in this country, had a constitutional right to admonish. Doug Moylan set us straight on that. If it's a public official like the Attorney General and you're only a lowly board member, you cannot admonish the Attorney General. Extrapolating from that, I suspect then that Milton Morinaga has expanded the doctrine of anti-admonishment to say that you cannot admonish an elected member of the Visitors Bureau and laid it right at the feet of Carl Gutierrez. That should have been it. That should have been it. I guess Milton didn't think to get an Attorney General's opinion. Of course, back then we had a different Attorney General. We had Levin in January, back in March 25. And I don't know if it was permissible to admonish Levin on a jet plane back in those days. I certainly did a lot of it myself. In fact, if there's any credit to Levin leaving in January that goes my way, I'll sign up for it. And I'll even repeat myself here. I don't have to, because Repeat will chime in on this one somewhere along the way. Yeah, Milton Morinaga began to admonish Gutierrez, saying, it's evident that over the past few days there have been a number of unwarranted and unsubstantiated comments and accusations aimed at this board. I gotta staple it wrong here. During the past few days, Gutierrez shot back. Here are the excerpts. I witnessed blatant abuse of the open government law, the ethical violations that I see all the time. And I'm not just saying this because we have records and I have to take this out to the public, that you cannot come in here as an airline owner or hotel owner and unvote an incentives that goes to your hotel or that airline and not recuse. When you say recuse yourself, you don't need to say yourself. You can't recuse somebody else. You people meet in secret to determine the outcome of what's going on a board meeting, and we have those information. In other words, Governor Carl is saying, and I got my receipts. Quote, if you want to get rid of me and Jerry Curtis Paris, you can make that motion and do it. But I'm not going to short my responsibility to allow the people of Guam's millions of tax dollars to be dictated by people who have special interests. Yeah. So Carl Gutierrez reached into his pocket and found a 12-gauge shotgun in there, which he blasted away with. A verbal 12-gauge shotgun. Jose, where's that horn? Yeah. May 12, 2022, the board was so stunned by the public accusations, it voted to halt all future meetings. As a result, no quorum could be achieved, no appropriations of the tourist attraction funds could be made, and the Guam legislature had to step in to transfer powers temporarily to Gutierrez. Now, the story about Amanda Shelton not being there when the session was called, but showing up 10 minutes before it was over, didn't make this timeline.
Oh, no, of course not.
Uh-huh.
Because she was on time.
Yeah. April 22 through February 23, backroom efforts to unseat Gutierrez. Board members and their corporate associates began meeting with senators and Adelup officials in a campaign to depose Gutierrez. Advertisements by certain companies involved in the scandal also began to increase on media platforms. Do you suppose that was the fart?
I don't suppose
Yeah.
it was.
What does that stand for, Jose?
That is the Facebook Administrative Response Team.
There you go, yeah. They began to increase on media platforms in tandem. Report news stories lukewarm to the allegations of corruption in opposition to Gutierrez. Yeah, you can depend on the media cartel to, you know, if there is a bull that comes charging forward with, you know, those great big Texas Longhorn horns, what's the media going to grab?
The horns.
The tail.
Oh, the tail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to grab the bull by the horns,
No.
that's for sure. November 2022, a new legislature is elected. January 2023, Shelton elected to chair VGVB Oversight Committee. Now, a little inside baseball here. You know, you look at the committees of this year's legislature and you look at the committees from the legislature before, and you're thinking, gosh, there's very little similarity here. Don't they have the same committees every year and just choose people? No, they don't. The whole thing is ad hoc. So you start out with a majority, 8 or more senators, and those 8 folks get into a smoke-filled room and they bargain back and forth. Well, I want public safety. Yeah, I want public safety too. Well, I'll tell you what, how about we split public safety? I'll take police and you can have fire and corrections. Can I have EPA along with that? What do you think? Well, I wanted it, but if that's what it takes to make the deal, okay. It's that kind of a process. And sometimes you got the whole thing set up in firm jello, and then when they come back again, you know, I got second thoughts about this. But that's how it works. It's ad hoc. So if Amanda Shelton wanted the Visitors Bureau, wanted to chair the GVB, it's because she wanted it. Not because someone pushed it on her. She wanted it, and she had to enter into that process in order to get it. And the same goes for Jesse Lohan. Now, a little more inside baseball. Jesse is the vice chairman of the commission, as you were of the committee, notwithstanding the fact that Jesse is a Republican, and after the election, there was a Democrat majority. There were, let's see, 9 Democrats and 6 Republicans. So you would have thought that the Republicans would have had very little say about who got what committees, and you would not have found a Republican vice chair. Well, you all remember the coup that took place inside the legislature where Joe San Augustine was the odds-on favored to be the chair, as being backed by the Adelope 9 at the time. But Therese Terlati tossed her chapeau. Where's Frenchie now that I really need him? A fancy French word for your hat. Therese tossed her chapeau into the ring. And Therese just so happened to be the most popular politician on Guam at the time. Drew more votes than anybody else, including the governor. So she had a certain cachet with her. And then Chris Malfunction Barnett cast his lot with Therese. Chris, from the get-go, said, "Don't look for traditional politics from me. I'm going to be a maverick. I'm running on the Democrat ticket." Let's take a short break here, and we'll come back to Chris, Jose.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Half a day. This is Clara Mangloño from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are. We're still talking about GVB versus the Carl and Joe Mack. November 2023. Shelton elected to chair GVB Oversight Committee. Lohan becomes deputy. And I've explained that the way that Shelton, only way she could have gotten that is if she wanted it. It was not thrust upon her saying, "Amanda, you got everything else you want. You're going to get stuck with GVB." Now, actually, that committee is always one of the most sought after. Because, once again, conventional wisdom tells you that if you're the chair of that committee, you get to do a lot of junkets. So when the GVB funds a trip to exotic places, it's really good politics to take the chairman of that committee along, right?
They went to Indiana?
Yeah, exotic places, Indiana, India, Indianapolis, Indiana, right. Yeah, so, that would be a desirable committee, and speculation. She may have had to give something precious, something she wanted, give it away in order to get GVB, because a lot of folks would like to have GVB. Now, the complication here is that Amanda Shelton is the niece of former board member and United Airlines executive Sam Shinohara, who is a target of the report of investigation, Joe Mack's investigation. And I've gone through the whole thing, the GEI Corporation, the dual memberships, etc. We'll probably dust those off again as we go along. In fact, later on in the game, Tom Fisher came along in the session of the legislature, or maybe it was a committee hearing. Fisher said, "Do you think that you're competent to be chairing this committee? Don't you have a conflict of interest?" And I think Shelton had the perfect defense. And she said something like, "Nepotism is okay, Senator Fisher, so long as you keep it in the family."
I don't want to go to that reunion.
No, she didn't really say that, but she brushed it off. She just brushed it off. And Shelton is really her nephew. How does it work? Shinahara's wife is, I think, Shelton's mother's sister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's not one of these, once again, tradition is if it's your third cousin once removed, but 20 years older than you, oh, he's my uncle, eh? Yeah, it's not one of those. It's the real...
it's a one-page flow chart.
Yeah, the real avuncular relative. Then we go to February 10, 2023. Shelton abruptly cancels oversight hearing Lujan called to probe GVB members on corruption allegations. Senator Lujan, the vice chair, attempts to begin an oversight hearing of GVB that he called while Shelton was off island. Now, as the vice chair, he becomes the acting chair in the absence of the chair. He had every right to do that. And a little bit of background on this idea of the oversight hearing. Everybody knows that the reason that the legislative committees have oversight hearings is to act as checks and balances on the administration. Well, not really. An oversight hearing can subpoena people to attend before the hearing. And if you don't attend in the face of a subpoena, the committee can fine you in contempt and ask the Attorney General to sanction you for your contumacious conduct.
Like having to work in the Vice Speaker's office.
Yeah, some really severe punishment.
Now, just that, if I'm not mistaken, this also, and I don't know if you're going to get to this, this is also the first time the vice chairs of a minority party have subpoena powers as well.
That's right. That's very true. That's right. In addition to being vice chair, they're denominated as having subpoena powers. So even if the chair doesn't want to, the vice chair can. You're right, Jose. Now, the real reason that legislative committees are permitted to do these oversight hearings, which generally turn out to be Class A ass-chewing for members of the administration, that would seem to be the real purpose, but it's not. Because there is case law that holds that the legislature, in order to find the facts necessary for them to do appropriate legislation, must have the ability to subpoena and fine in contempt and bring people before them for cross-examination. But it very seldom ever turns out that way. It's more fun to just call people in and give them a really good ass-chewing, right? So Lujan called that hearing when Shelton was off island. Shelton returned to the island that morning and canceled the oversight hearing abruptly. Abruptly, is being polite. 6 minutes before the hearing was about to start, she sent a note saying this hearing is canceled.
Denied.
Now, that figure that you saw kind of flying through the air as though someone had pulled a rug out from under his feet and tripped him up so that he kind of flattened out and fell on his face, that would be Jessie Lujan, because she really jerked the rug out from under her vice chairman. And all in the name of comedy and politeness and civility, I suppose, right? She was later on heard to say that, well, that Jesse only invited 4 people. The 4 people being counsel, her uncle, chair and vice chair of the visitor. And she said, we got to let more people come in and talk about this stuff.
I want a bigger party.
Yeah, I want if it's my committee, I want to have a lot of people there, because it's kind of like, going to the lab. I just went to the labs the other day, and I went to one of the labs here in Island, and you can't just walk into the lab and have them stick a needle in your arm, because the business model is the waiting room has to be full. Otherwise, people won't know that you're really good at what you do, right? I think Shelton uses that same philosophy. If there aren't a lot of people coming to testify at my hearing, who's going to vote for me next time? No, that's not what she's saying. Anyhow, going on here. Shelton canceled the hearing that morning very abruptly. The hearing was to expose the results of the investigation and to probe board members about the allegations of corruption, something that I think everybody in this island would be very interested in, especially the folks who make their money off the visitors' interest, who are not part of the clique. February 24, GVB membership elects new board members. March 23, 2023, new board makes first public ouster attempt. Board members, without any notice, push for a snap performance evaluation of Gutierrez and McDonald. Okay, all right, well, congratulations, board members. You're sworn in now. You can have a meeting for the first time since last May. I suspect you got some really important business to do. Yeah, recognizing member, I don't remember which one it was. Well, I want to have an evaluation of the general manager, president, and Joe Mack. Let's do that right now. First item, kind of like Rory wanting to throw in the towel on the Port 7 and the AYK case. Or D, what wasn't it? That wasn't AY, it was YTK case, yeah. Remember that? Kind of the same thing. There's all kinds of stuff to do, but we want to get to the juicy stuff first, right? Despite the absence of any kind of an evaluation process, this prompts the majority of VVB sent to sign a petition opposing the board move, and several employees to speak with candidate on condition of anonymity. It carries a lot of weight, because they spoke anonymously.
Has to be true.
It's got to be true. The performance evaluations, according to the employees, would be the board's cover for ousting Gutierrez and McDonald and making it look like it was for cause. April 6, corruption investigation report released, sent to AG and public auditor. A scathing report making major allegations of corruption against current and former board members and vendors of GVB is publicly released and referred for criminal findings to the Office of the Attorney General and for audit by the Office of Public Accountability. Potential criminal investigations going on there. Plus, the word clawback has to enter into the conversation here. Clawback. Can you see that in the theater of the mind? What a clawback would mean? Well, it's actually a bankruptcy term. In Law and Order notebooks here, Jose, there are things in bankruptcy law called voidable preference. And let's say that Corporation X goes bankrupt on the 1st of April. But Corporation X paid some of the money that it owed to Corporation Y for 4 months before it declared bankruptcy. These are called voidable preferences. Anything that the bankrupt paid out of the bankruptcy estate to creditors before the declaration of bankruptcy must be clawed back into the bankruptcy estate by the trustee in bankruptcy. So, you know, on February 1st, X Corporation paid you the money you owed, and then on April 1st, they declare bankruptcy. You say, man, I was lucky on that one because they paid me the money. You know, no, because the clawback comes in. That's what clawback makes. Now, there's sometimes when the clawback can go all the way back to 1 year. But anyhow, I don't expect tailgaters to be experts in bankruptcy. I just wanted to use this to explain what clawback means. But if you read that report and you see what's going on there, wouldn't you think that the Visitors Bureau would have the duty to claw back some of these illegal payments? Maybe, maybe not. But just the chance of that would certainly make a good reason to have Joe Mack go practice law somewhere else and take the general manager with him. April 27, new board makes second public ouster attempt. At its latest meeting, the board dumped its performance evaluation ruse altogether and instead voted to open both Gutierrez's position and a new council contract period for hiring, essentially pushing both Gutierrez and Joe Mack out. The vote was declared void the following day when Attorney General Douglas Moylan released a legal opinion concerning the membership of Monte Mesa on the board. Now, this board is a real Rube Goldberg contraption. Some of the members are appointed by the governor, advice and consent of the legislature. Some are voted in by the members of this corporation, almost all of whom happen to be in the visitor industry. And a member, if he ponies up $100 each, can have as many as 100 memberships. Okay, and then that takes you up to 11 members, and then there is a 12th member, and the 12th member, according to the bylaws, must be elected by the other 11. Well, the time that Monte Mesa was hired, there were not 11 members there. But the chair at that time said, well, we'll just go forward. So long as we got a majority of the members here, it's okay, right? And Joe Mack says, folks, no, it's not okay. But I think that this never made the paper, and I never even talked about it on the show, but I think somewhere in violation of the open government law, the board must have created a new office at the Visitors Bureau called the Office of Unheeded Advice. And if you were to find that office up at the Visitors Bureau digs up there in Epau Park, you'd find a sign on the door that said Office of Unheeded Advice. And the sign underneath it says Joe McDonald, ESQ. Because it seems like, you know, the name says it all. If Joe McDonald says it, it can't possibly right. Of course, he's been right as rain every time. But there's a difference between not agreeing with the advice and not wanting to, and agreeing with it and just not wanting to follow it. So they made a job announcement. We need a new president and we need new council. April 20, and I forgot to mention that the person who made the motion to go on the job search for the president and for council was none other than Monte Mesa, the guy who wasn't even a legit board member. So this thing just, it's like a gigantic three-dimensional puzzle. Every time you put a piece on the puzzle, it doesn't fit. And you got to take it apart and put it together again. All right, let's take a short break here, and we'll come back to GVB versus the Carl.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Okay, then we go on to April 28th, and the key players here are Sonny Atta and Mary Rhodes. Sonny Atta is a landlord. He never owned the 19th floor, but he owns a lot of rental property on the island. Mary Rhodes is the president or chairman, I don't remember which, of the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association. You know, a real tourism expert. And she probably is the kind of person you want on the GVB board because she lives and breathes it. But here's what happened during the board meeting on April 28th. Board meeting minutes of March 8th, and these are read at the April 28 meeting. Board minutes of the March 8 meeting where members Sonny Atta and Mary Rhodes are overheard on recording of meeting discussing desire to fire legal counsel. According to the minutes of March 28, as were the minutes of March 8, which were compiled from audio recording, board members Sonny Atta and Mary Rhodes had a conversation about ousting legal counsel Joe Mack. Director Atta stated he thinks the board should get its own legal counsel. This is what the recording secretary recorded in the minutes. And unfortunately, Atta didn't think he was addressing the person taking the minutes, but, you know, at least something works there. Or, you know, maybe this isn't what it appears to be. Maybe ordinarily the only thing that would go into the minutes were parts of the official discussion. But maybe the recording secretary is thinking, I heard it. I'm going to put it in my minutes. We'll just see what happens here. And then the next item, Director Rhodes expressed the need to fire legal counsel. Atta wants their own on the board, and Rhodes wants to fire him. Director Atta said it cannot be addressed because it's not on the agenda. Well, at least somebody there knows about the open government law. But you had these two statements here. And I remember when this came up, you know, I think Morinaga said the same thing. Well, who does McDonald represent? Does he represent the president or does he represent the board? And I think McDonald said, I represent the corporation. And that, of course, is not only the right answer, it's the only answer. But can you imagine any agency where the board has counsel and then the director or president or whatever the chief operating officer is has his own counsel. Is that so they can sue each other? Wow. The corruption investigation report is under review by the Attorney General. According to Gutierrez's public statements made on the Ray Gibson show, Public Auditor Benjamin Cruz also will be conducting a thorough review of the matter. The report alleges the illegal and unethical misuse and appropriation of public funds to the benefit of certain board members and associates to the tune of $10 million. That sounds like a really big claw, doesn't it? So that's the timeline, bringing it up here to date. And I went through a pretty long piece on this yesterday that Troy ran. This is why GVB board wants to get rid of Carl Gutierrez and Joseph McDonald. And I think by now there ought to be some general understandings of who's doing what and what they're attempting to do out there amongst the general population of the island. So we'll have to watch every meeting of the board of directors like a hawk. And of course, the legislature does have an important role to play in this, because in a case decided long ago called Pilar Laguatnia versus GVB, the court decided that GVB is not a government agency. It's an independent corporation chartered by the government, where the government has a certain role. The GVB has the ability to develop its own personnel rules, but they never did. They just adopted GovGuam rules by reference. So it sure looks like a government of Guam agency. It sure performs like a government of Guam agency. I suppose if you had a really sharp nose, you'd say it even smells like a government of Guam agency. But it is under legislative control. If the legislature wanted to, and they had the votes, they could abolish the Visitors Bureau tomorrow. They could change the construction of the board. They could put more caveats, do's and don'ts into the statute. They could change the mission of the Visitors Bureau. And this, after all, is why we elected them. So I'm kind of hoping that Amanda Shelton will allow a real hearing to go forward on this. And I'm hoping for some really in-depth cross-examination of members of the board. It would be good if key players on that board are subpoenaed. So I think we pretty well know what the position of the Carl, Jerry Curtis Paris, and Joe McDonald are. But I'd like to hear from Milton Morinaga. I'd like to hear from United Airlines, Sam Shinohara, from Sonny Atta, from some of these, Mary Rose, some of these other people who appear to have axes to grind. And with this caveat, if you are out there and you are an axe grinder, the only thing that results, we always want people to keep their nose to the grindstone, right, Jose? But you can't keep your nose to the grindstone and grind an axe at the same time. Keeping your nose to the grindstone, of course, means being diligent, hardworking, etc. But the only thing you get out of grinding the axe, being an axe grinder, if you do it too long, you're going to wind up with a sore back. So if that's what you're doing, it's time to quit. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show, and I'll come back and wrap this up and then go to the next item on the card.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
No motive yet. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Atlanta police say they don't know why a man shot 5 women in a doctor's waiting room yesterday, killing one and injuring the other 4. Fox's Gernal Scott explains how police caught the suspect, 24-year-old Dion Patterson.
The Atlanta Chief of Investigation, Charles Hampton, said technology helped officers discover Patterson was no longer in Atlanta.
He was in Cobb County.
The chief there, Stuart Van Hooser, said one of his undercover officers was first to see Patterson.
Was able to then have backup from uniformed officers that came in and took him into custody without incident.
Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens praised the cooperation that helped to get a dangerous man off the streets in Georgia.
The woman killed was identified as 39-year-old Amy St. Pierre, who worked for the CDC in Atlanta. 3 of the 4 injured women are in critical condition. The New York City Medical Examiner rules a subway rider died from a 15-minute chokehold, meaning his death is a homicide. The DA is considering charges against a U.S. Marine who put Jordan Neely in that chokehold because he was acting erratically. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates by a 1/4 percentage point yesterday, pushing the rate to more than 5%. That's the highest since 2007. At the same time, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said it is crucial that Congress raise the country's debt limit.
It's essential that the debt ceiling be raised in a timely way so that the U.S. government can pay all of its bills when they're due. A failure to do that would be unprecedented. We'd be in uncharted territory, and the consequences to the U.S. economy would be highly uncertain and could be quite averse.
Republican Speaker McCarthy and Senate Minority Leader Mitchell agreed to attend a debt ceiling meeting next week with President Biden and the top 2 Democratic leaders. America's listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Congressional Republicans say a whistleblower told them President Biden committed a crime when he was vice president.
We have credible information that this possible criminal activity took place.
That's Iowa GOP Senator Chuck Grassley, who, along with House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, say the FBI is in possession of an unclassified document that describes a criminal scheme. The whistleblower alleges there was an exchange of money with a foreign national for policy decisions. The White House firing back, saying Republicans in Congress have spent 5 years lobbying unfounded, unproven, politically motivated attacks against the president and his family without offering evidence for their claims.
Fox's Marianne Rafferty. The Palestinian Health Ministry says Israeli troops killed 3 people in a raid in the West Bank today. Israel says the dead were gunmen who killed a British-Israeli mother and daughter in attacks last month. U.S. officials say they're not sure a Russian video of a drone strike on the Kremlin is real.
Russian media released video showing what appears to be drones downed near the Kremlin in Moscow. Russian officials are calling it an assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin by Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the U.S. has not authenticated the video.
Since the beginning of this conflict, the United States is certainly not encouraging, enabling Ukraine to strike beyond its borders. We've been very clear from here about that.
The administration is releasing another $300 million of Ukrainian military assistance.
Fox's Jared Halpern. And real snakes on a plane, not a movie. Customs officials in India say a woman arriving from Malaysia attempted to smuggle 22 snakes into the country in her luggage. They also found a chameleon. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Express yourself into the groove. The Guam Chamber of Commerce celebrates its 99th anniversary at the Dusatani Resort on May 6th with the theme of Madonna's Vogue. The Chamber's membership includes many corporations, large and small, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. Members play a key part in making Guam a star-bright place to live, work, and play. Let's congratulate the Guam Chamber of Commerce and its members on celebrating its 99th anniversary.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatnya location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Join us on May 12th as we host our annual PBS Guam Pledge Drive. Tune in and show your support for quality, educational, and entertaining programming. Your contributions help us continue to bring you thought-provoking documentaries, captivating cultural programs, and engaging children's shows. So tune in to PBS Guam Friday, May 12th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. and pledge your support to help us keep Guam enriched, inspired, and entertained. Viva!
Okay, so here we are, the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery, and Jose is going to tell you for the 417th time, well, he's been a lot of times, how you too can be on the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery. Go ahead, Jose.
And I am happy to state it again. You too can become a part of the Tall Tales I'm a Tailgater Rogues Gallery by ordering your shirt by pointing your browser to the point.gu. That's the official website of this radio station. There you'll find a picture of the shirt with a beard. Click on the picture. It'll take you to where you can order your shirt. And when it arrives, put it on, take a selfie, and send that selfie to the Points WhatsApp at 671-797-8255. And you too can find yourself on the Rogues Gallery rotation.
Okay. And next on the program, Wahasi Pescador. And we have a new player in the abortion game other than Tom Fisher. It's none other than Won't Parkinson.
Does he have a uterus?
He does not have. I don't know. He hasn't told us.
Oh, okay.
He hasn't. He has not made the necessary pronouncement. So we'll have to presume. We'll have to view Won't Parkinson in a light most favorable to Won't. just in the name of fairness.
Usually Ray can get them to reveal whether they have one or not.
He's good at that, yeah. Ray's a skilled cross-examiner. But for now, although it's against the rules of the show, we're going to give Won't Parkinson the benefit of the doubt. Something you almost never hear on Tall Tales. We're going to assume that he has a uterus until we get clear and convincing evidence that he does not have a uterus. Now, we know that Tom Fisher does not have a uterus. He has told us that, yeah. So I'm going to ask Jose to pick up a piece from the Pacific Island Times to show you that I could put this on the card as Won't versus Pescador, but I don't think I will. Go ahead, Jose.
Entitled New Guam Bill to Pave Way for Legal Action to Stop Anti-Abortion Policies. And this, of course, is in the Pacific Island Times, the digital version. Senator William A. Parkinson on Wednesday introduced a bill seeking to push the government away from individual decisions on pregnancy by allowing private individuals and healthcare providers...
Hold on a second. Yeah. Push people away from individual decisions? I thought that was a woman's right to choose.
People.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a woman's right to choose, bodily autonomy, and, you know, the Constitution. Well, go on. Pardon me for interrupting, Jose.
It's okay. He introduced a bill seeking to push the government away from individual decisions on pregnancy by allowing private individuals and healthcare providers to sue any official imposing restrictions on abortion. Despite the lack of available physicians who perform such a service, abortion remains legal on Guam. Parkinson said Bill 11137 was in response to Senator Tom Fisher's Bill 10637, which would place the issue of abortion on the ballot in the next general elections. I agree with Senator Fisher. You should decide. The government shouldn't decide for you. The people of Guam do not get to vote on what you do with your uterus, Parkinson said.
Well,
not my uterus.
Yeah, he's not looking out for his own uterus. He's looking out for your
uterus.
No, wait a minute. You don't have a uterus either.
No, I don't. Yeah. That was a quote.
Maybe we should develop something like lapel pins or something like that. So if you do have a uterus, you've got this big silver U that you pin on your lapel, like this one I'm wearing on my shirt here. Like
okay,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what we should do to end all of this ambiguity, right?
That it would make things more clear.
Yeah. Maybe we could even, you know, if Fisher's bill becomes law, maybe before it's passed, there could be a floor amendment restricting the right to vote on that to only to people who have uteruses.
Oh, I'll go one step further.
Okay.
The right to testify only if you have a uterus.
Good call, Jose.
It would make a very interesting, concise, and woke session.
Exactly. Well, pardon me for the second interruption. Go ahead, Jose.
It's okay. We're making great strides here. However, he added the proposed referendum was unnecessary. Bill 11137 is a proposed addendum to Fisher's Health Protection Act of 2023. While noting that the proposed Health Protection Act presents great ideas for expanding abortion access and services in Guam, Parkinson disagreed with the proposal to make the people decide on the bill through a vote. Parkinson estimated that a referendum could cost between $75,000 and $100,000, and if we did that for every bill submitted just in the first 100 days alone, that would be about $10 million, he added. He doesn't have a uterus, but he has a calculator.
He does.
So Senator Fisher called his bill, You Decide. I agree.
No, hang on a second. You, is there a period behind that word, behind the letter U?
Y-O-U. But that's a great distinction.
Yeah, I thought it was the letter U with a period behind it.
And it ought to be.
It should be. If he were more of a tailgater, he'd understand things like that, right? Yeah. The uterus decide, Bill. I think that's what we'll call it here on Tall Tales from now on.
That's going to be my testimony.
Yes.
Senator Fisher called his bill YOU, you decide.
Not knowing that it's really the you decide bill. Go on.
Parkinson said, I agree. You should decide. You should decide what is best for you.
I'm really confused now. There was a time, probably, Jose, when I was like in 5th grade, I understood pronouns to a fare thee well. I knew my buddy Danny Harkness. I refer to him and he and his and stuff like that. And like Mary Jensen, that would have been she, her, hers, etc. I would have been you or I, etc., stuff like that. First, I guess the first sign of confusion was when I was in boot camp, and I heard somebody say to the drill instructor, "Sir, can you tell me?" And the drill instructor said, "You? Who are you talking to? Do I look like a female sheep to you?"
Okay, so this is the distinction.
Yeah.
Parkinson's bill is the letter U decide, while Fisher's bill is EWE decide, as in the sheep.
The sheep get to decide, yeah. Good call, Jose.
See,
well, you're good at this. Yeah.
This is the reason why our tailgaters tune in. You can't get this kind of education anywhere else.
Nowhere else. You probably wouldn't want it. Go on.
You should decide what to do with your own body.
And there's some symmetry here, because a sheep does, a ewe, a female sheep does have a uterus.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like my three-dimensional puzzle.
Yes, you does.
Yeah, the pieces can be made to fit together. Go ahead.
Oh, boy. You have agency to your own destiny, and the government should never stand in the way of that. We do not put the fundamental right of others up for a public vote. Interesting. Bill 111 would allow health care providers to provide abortion services without limitations or restrictions that are more burdensome than those restrictions imposed on medically comparable procedures. The bill would also authorize the Attorney General to file legal actions to stop any government official from implementing or enforcing any restrictions on abortion. We are a republic, a representative democracy. A republic can handle tough social issues without punting the ball to an expensive legislative submission process, Parkinson said. A republic can take testimony from the public, weigh the issues, and decide on legislation. A republic can do all these things because that is what a republic is meant to do, he added. Go ahead.
I bet you if you confronted Tom Fisher with this, he'd say, I never punted. It was a field goal. You've heard of 3-pointers, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah, so
members of the alliance are working together to strengthen reproductive freedom in the face of an unprecedented assault on abortion access and other forms of reproductive health care by states hostile to abortion rights and judges advancing their ideological agenda. Okay, that's where I got to stop here.
Yeah.
I can understand disagreeing with anti-abortionists, but when you say unprecedented assault on abortion access, it's like saying people who are peace protesters who are protest against war are doing an aggressive assault on war. And it just doesn't make any sense at all. Let's see. Hostile to abortion rights and judges advancing their ideological agenda. How can we never see the definition of abortion or the description of the process when he's describing these things? During these testimonies, I hope when the question and answer part happens sometimes, that we question that Senator Will Parkinson. What is his definition, or does he understand the process of abortion and how hostile that is?
And, of course, the reason that the pro-aborts never want to talk about it, because it's so gruesome.
Or see it.
Or see it, yeah.
They always talk about that important picture that a Vietnam War reporter, photographer, had published that seemingly ended the war.
The napalm picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it wasn't until people actually saw what was happening that they, in their minds, said this has to stop.
The napalm picture and the execution picture. Remember that?
The execution picture, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, when I hear those words, I just see those two pictures right in the front of my head.
The napalm picture was a girl that had her clothes burnt off.
Yep.
She was running away from the napalmed area of brush, and the photographer took a picture of her wailing face.
Yeah, and she was maybe, what, 9 or 10, something like that?
Yeah.
And then the execution picture was, I think, the chief of police of what we used
the good guys.
Yeah, of what we used to call Saigon, found this guy that he thought was Viet Cong, so he puts his pistol up beside the guy's head and boom,
pulls it
right there. Instant due process of law. Yeah, that really changed a lot of minds, didn't it?
And it goes also to say that there was and you've seen this before online, it's on YouTube, an abortionist who actually viewed an abortion through a video of what he was doing, and that's when he turned into a anti-abortionist.
Yeah.
Because he actually saw the dismemberment, the mutilation of what he was doing and to whom he was doing it to.
Yeah.
And that was a baby.
Yeah, and we wouldn't stand for anyone doing the same thing to a corpse, would we?
Absolutely not.
No.
And here on Guam, when a lady had brought her dead, just born corpse of a baby to GMH, she was promptly arrested.
Yeah.
I don't remember the outcome of it, but the outrage on this island was stark.
Absolutely.
Continuing on with this.
Yes, sir.
This is Parkinson again. I have always stood for access to the full range of reproductive of abortion available today, and I intend to keep it an abortion choice as a private decision between a person, not a woman, not a person with a uterus, just a person, their physician, and anyone else they choose to involve in that decision.
She added.
That's
the governor. She, yeah. Okay, and I noticed the governor understands pronouns because she's talking about decision between a person and their physician. So she's correct there. We don't know if the person who wants the abortion is a male or a female. We don't know how many there are, so we've got to use there, right? Okay, I see somebody trying to get in the green room. We're just beginning this part of the card, but this is a pretty good time to entertain a phone call from, is it that Phil?
That Phil.
Yeah. Go ahead, Phil.
Bob, I can't help but, sir, you guys are making me laugh. I don't have a uterus. Can I file racial gender against the two senators?
If you can't, they should introduce a law that allows it, Phil.
Because they're for the community, right? The whole people, including penises.
Is that something like a Democrat?
Yeah. Thanks for making me laugh today. It is serious though, but it's funny as well.
Yeah. Well, the subject is serious. The players are what's funny. How they can twist their minds around like pretzels to justify.
About it.
Yeah, to justify the absolutely unjustifiable.
I voted for both of them for new people, new faces in the legislature.
Well, so, you know when it comes to Tom Fisher, I never heard any of this stuff during the campaign. None of it came out until after the votes were safely counted. So I guess it's time for me to say there are only two things about Tom Fisher that I don't like. His face.
All right.
Good calling, Phil. Thanks again. Yeah. There's a tailgater for you.
And, you know, we're not being insensitive to the subject of abortion. You're right. We have to poke fun at the pseudo seriousness that's coming out of these senators' mouths.
And you know, I'm going to make a report here. Although I'm not the reporter. I have a report to make today. And I was talking with someone at the Rotary Club luncheon, and Tom was the speaker. And I was talking to somebody else who uses his brain housing group instead of his alimentary canal for thinking processes. And he was remarking on the ridiculousness of this whole thing. And I said, well, and it was wondering how people can get their heads wrapped around this. And I said, well, if the situation that you're advocating is so short of logic that it cannot be made in any kind of a logical fashion, then the only alternative you have is to invent new terminology and language to deal with this lack of knowledge. So you're not talking about killing a baby. You're not talking about taking the life of a helpless, innocent, defenseless human. You're talking about reproductive health. That's what you're talking about. You're not talking about something that, but for the elapse or the failure of the elapse of a matter of minutes would be murder, you know, before and after the baby emerges from his mother's body. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about the right to choice. You're talking about bodily autonomy and all of these other silly things that really camouflage the total lack of logic in so many other things. Things like empathy, conscience, etc.
Well, that's today's title of the program. When you're angry at a pro-abort, just remember, there was a time you didn't know anything about biology or ethics or human rights or logic, too.
Yeah, but then you were born.
Then you were born.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to just take a moment here to make my report. As you know, I usually don't make reports. I usually draw my facts from news reports. But yesterday, Ken was on the air urging us to watch the hearing that Senator Shelton chaired last night on the port, and I did. And Ken, the next time you see one like that, that was right up there with Gone with the Wind or one of the Abbott and Costello movies that I like so well, or A Farewell to Arms, or Casablanca. It was great film entertainment. There's just no getting around it. Unfortunately, you know, the old saying is that people ordinarily get the kind of government they deserve. Nobody deserves some of the stuff I saw last night.
We don't deserve this.
Nobody deserves that. And, of course, the star of the whole show was Warren Wolf, also known as Louis Baza. That
I heard that he was a gem.
Yeah, that was a gem. Louis Baza was the local analog to the character on the movie Pulp Fiction, that every gangster knew if you had a messy murder that you wanted to dispose of, you called in the Wolf, and he'd clean it all up and make it go away for you, post haste, no questions asked, etc. So when there was a mess at the port, who did they call? Who did Rory call in to clean up the Port 7 mess?
The Wolf.
The Wolf. You'll recall that Rory, at his first meeting with his new board of directors, said, yeah, I don't like the way this Port 7 thing is going down. So he named somebody named Shinohara, small world, to develop a task force to evaluate whether or not the Port 7 was properly dealt with. Well, I think that lasted maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and Shinohara all of a sudden disappeared. Rory also said, we got to get rid of Mike Phillips. He's costing us too much money. We have to have in-house counsel to save us a lot of money. So they got rid of Mike Phillips at the end of his contract and brought in none other than Joe McDonald, who has impressed me as being a good lawyer and a straight shooter. They brought in Joe McDonald in-house as an employee. I think Joe McDonald was 3 weeks or so, and he was gone. So then they brought in Luis Baza, also known as Warren Wolf, and Rory delegated his authority to settle the Port 7 cases with counsel for the Port 7. And Warren Wolf told us last night that he entered into settlement negotiation with 2 of the lawyers. And the question was, well, who drew up the settlement agreements? Well, I did, because we didn't have a lawyer. He actually said that. I did. We didn't have a lawyer.
Wow. Now, I heard...
I hope that he never goes to work at the hospital.
Who performed the surgery?
Well, I did, because there weren't any doctors there. Yeah, keep that guy out of Washington no matter what, right? Yeah, that's what he said. And then, well, how could you do that? And he said, well, McDonald did a couple, and I just took his and, changed them and used them. That's all you need.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
There's going to be another award that they give themselves tomorrow.
Yeah.
The Fill in the Blanks Award.
Yeah. So that's what he said. And then everybody, Fisher, Brown, Jesse, peppered him with the same question. Weren't you on the Civil Service Commission, Luis Baza? Oh, yes, I was. I was the chairman. And didn't the Civil Service Commission rule on some of these Port 7 cases? Yes, they did. Well, isn't that a conflict then for you to come from the Civil Service Commission to the port? And Warren Wolf said, no, because when I was in the Civil Service Commission, I recused. The 2 lawyers wanted me to recuse. The board members wanted me to stay there, so I recused.
It's the same difference.
Yeah. Well, later on, Senator Brown came along and said, I was the general manager of the port at that time, and I had to spend an awful lot of experience, a lot of time at the Civil Service Commission. She didn't say this, but they have a silly rule that says when the employee's adverse action hearing comes before the commission, the director has to be there. So she said, I spent an awful lot of time there. I remember one of those cases that turned on clear and convincing evidence. And you got it wrong. And the lawyers kept telling you you got it wrong, but you stuck with it. And the port, of course, won that case on appeal, and it came back. So you were there. You sat on one of those cases. If you sat on one, was that it? And then is it okay for you to come to the port and negotiate settlement agreement? Isn't that a conflict of interest? I recused. Now, I remember when this all came down, and the rules say that in order for the commission to sustain a termination, an adverse action by management, there has to be clear and convincing evidence in the record, except if what the employee was accused of doing would constitute a crime, then substantial evidence is good enough. Now, of course, when you hear the word substantial, substantial evidence, you'll remember when our Washington rep, right, when Mike was, they had substantial evidence on, that's serious? Well, substantial evidence is a very low standard. It's higher than reasonable suspicion, lower than preponderance of the evidence. It is a low standard. Unless it happens to be our Washington representative and we're playing pin the tail on Mike, then it's fine, right?
Only for the FART.
Yes, exactly. So when he was running for governor, yeah. So that case, I remember when that case went up in the Supreme Court, explained why substantial evidence is good enough if it's a criminal prosecution. But this is not Law and Order time. This is time, it was mentioned in this public hearing. You were there for that hearing. And now you're coming back and taking another shot, another bite out of the same apple, and you think it's okay. Whoa. How can you possibly justify? I think I answered that question. And that was his answer, I already answered that question. Sort of a race judicata for questions, right? So that was kind of the high point of the night as far as I was concerned.
Does any of that testimony jeopardize the settlements?
No. No, because...
Could it bring up an ethical charge?
Well, not against him, because he's not bound by the rules of ethics.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. And, I don't know if the ethics law was in place. There was no commission. That'd be an interesting question. Let's head for Wrigley Field, and we'll come back to this one.
Express yourself into the groove. The Guam Chamber of Commerce celebrates its 99th anniversary at the Dusatani Resort on May 6th with the theme of Madonna's Vogue. The Chamber's membership includes many corporations, large and small, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. Members play a key part in making Guam a star-bright place to live, work, and play. Let's congratulate the Guam Chamber of Commerce and its members on celebrating its 99th anniversary.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
So, no, Jose, I think it would be hard to stick Louis Baza. Obviously, you can't stick him with attorney's ethics because even he understands he's not a lawyer. And I don't think it would be unethical for the lawyers that sat down and negotiated with him. I think what it amounts to is the rule in taking candy from a baby. We all know that you shouldn't take candy from a baby. And that's what a lawyer sitting down with...
That's what the attorney did.
Yeah. However, if the baby's... Boy, I have to be careful here. If the baby's birthing person says you could take candy away from my baby, then it's not unethical, because then the candy grabber would be dealing with the baby in the scope of its apparent authority. But how could, and the chairman, the 10-year chairman of the board was sitting there watching all this stuff, as was the director or the general manager of the port, a certain Rory Respicio, sitting there watching all of this stuff.
So there's a certain amount of negligence then, allowing him to go up against two lawyers to settle.
At the very best. But, the whole story, and I've told this story before, Rory's first meeting, he appointed Shinohara, and then from Shinohara we went to Joe Neither one of them lasted very long. And then he brought in Baza because he didn't have a lawyer, etc. Rory also wanted to settle the YTK, make that clear, and said, you know, what we ought to do, we ought to sit down with Champ Calvo and negotiate this. And Oscar Calvo really took offense, who was at the end of his term as a board member, said, you didn't have authority for the board to do that. What are you doing? And Rory said, well, I didn't do that. Well, you know, I just asked him if he'd be amenable. Well, it turns out later on they not only had agreed where and when they were going to sit down. And Calvo said, you ought to resign. But Rory had settlement-itis from the very beginning. And then, of course, we all know what happened when Cole came along, right? Rory fired Cole because Cole was on house arrest. He couldn't carry a gun, and he couldn't come to work. And Cole was accused of true rapes. He really dragged the name of the Port Authority through the mud. He had excellent counsel. He got not guilty verdicts out of the jury, which is fine. That's the way the system operates. And Rory took it upon himself to negotiate a settlement agreement without the board saying, go negotiate it. He just did it himself and said to the board, here's the settlement agreement, and here's a resolution you can sign approving the settlement agreement, approving like $160,000 in back pay for Cole and $40,000 for counsel. And I'm not finished with that one yet. So, you know, I could see why Rory would want to have Warren Wolf, also known as Louis Baza, doing his negotiating for him, because a counsel, a lawyer with his head screwed on right, is not going to let you give away the store, no matter what. So there we are. So that was I couldn't watch Fox News last night.
You're watching that.
Yeah. You know, Channel 39 sometimes, but I don't think there was anything on TV last night that was more entertaining than that hearing.
Well, I'm going to make my amateur declaration then.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say it's easy to get away with this kind of stuff when money is just pouring into your agency.
Exactly.
Because who's going to care about that kind of stuff when you have dollar signs
Exactly.
everywhere?
Yeah. So Ken tipped me off to this. Let's give Ken a big hand. You know, Major League Baseball teams have scouts. They'll go around and they'll watch AAA games, high school games, college games. They're always looking for talent, right? Well, boy, Ken found some real talent last night. Louis Baza is perhaps right up there, Academy Award quality. Yeah. So, Ken, keep it up. I'm as a matter of fact, I'm going to appoint you an official scout for Tall Tales. You are authorized to quit yourself with such credentials and badges as you might need to properly accomplish your task. Congratulations, Ken. Okay, the other report I have to make is that I was invited to the Rotary Club of Guam today. And, you know, maybe I was, because after Fisher spoke, there was a dialogue, and I was probably so contentious they'll never invite me back again. We want to have, anyhow.
I heard it was interesting.
It was pretty interesting, but the one thing that I do want to repeat from the show is that, you know, Fisher and I were talking about case law, Roe versus Wade, Griswold versus Connecticut, the Dobbs decision, etc. And Tom took issue with Justice Alito's decision on the Dobbs decision, which Tom said rates right up there with Dred Scott and Plessy versus Ferguson, and then he criticized the rationale decidendi, the reason for the decision. And he pointed out that Alito went into the idea that because the word abortion doesn't appear in the Constitution, the right to abortion has to be firmly grounded in the history and traditions of the country, or something like that. And Tom disagreed with that. So I was given the opportunity to speak, as shy as I am around a microphone, Jose. And I said, let's just talk about this history and tradition thing. Actually, Roe versus Wade is nothing new. Roe versus Wade goes all the way back to George Washington's decision when he crossed the Delaware. Get it out there, Facebookers.
You see, when...
yeah, that's it. Roe versus Wade. So, anyhow, Tom and I had a spirited debate, but I don't like to report on those kinds of things myself, because if you didn't hear it, you're not going to be able to grasp it. And it's really difficult to explain someone else's position and do it right. You tend to explain it through the optics of your own position, and that's just not the way it should be done.
Well, some of these media outlets do coverage on these Rotary Club luncheons, sometimes a little blurb, but because of the subject matter, I'm sure it got the interest of some of the media. I'm sure they were there, and I'm looking forward to how they spin it.
I saw one guy interviewing him and one of the other guests. I didn't see anybody else there.
No.
No.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But you would have thought they would have been there if they are interested in this at all. Of course, PNC wouldn't be there because Tom never sent out a press release, as far as I know. And that's PNC, the way PNC does it. The Daily News might not have come, because had they covered it, they might have felt embarrassed by not writing an editorial on what they saw. The Post tends to cover stuff like this, so I don't know what happened to the Post.
Probably not endorsed by Adelup.
Yeah, that's probably true.
They might be there for Will Parkinson's luncheon.
You mean for Won't Parkinson's luncheon? Yeah. All right, let's take a short break here.
Join us on May 12th as we host our annual PBS Guam Pledge Drive. Tune in and show your support for quality, educational, and entertaining programming. Your contributions help us continue to bring you thought-provoking documentaries, captivating cultural programs, and engaging children's shows. So tune in to PBS Guam Friday, May 12th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. and pledge your support to help us keep Guam enriched, inspired, and entertained. Viva!
Well, here we are, Churchill Downs. 6 furlongs, and I crossed the line. And, I'm reminded by the old saying that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. When you're talking father and son relationships. Well, I remember when they brought back the TV show Dallas, the guy that played... I can't remember which one it was, but it wasn't you remember the villain in Dallas?
JR.
Yeah, JR, yeah. So the guy that played the good guy... Bobby, yeah. They asked the Bobby guy, he said, well, is the JR in the new one, is it going to be more of a case of the apple not falling far from the tree? And JR said, no, it's more like the apple not falling far from the horse. You have my permission to use that one wherever you want to, Jose.
Right. You know what's amazing about that show, as an aside, I have never watched that show in my life, but because of the way popular culture was in the 80s,
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I felt the same way. I don't watch soap operas. Not that I got anything against soap. Soap is for washing your mouth out when you say something wrong. And I never watch shows that have laugh tracks. If you can't make an audience laugh, you got to have a laugh track. Count me out. You'll never find a laugh track on Tall Tale because you don't need it. Right, Jose?
We do. That's because we keep our own Joe in the studio.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not a laugh track. That's real.
That's real.
That's the real Joe Cruz. Yeah. Okay, so going back to this whole abortion legislation kerfuffle. You know, there's an old political saying, or maybe it's not even political, that politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, strange as it may seem, abortion politics do indeed make strange bedfellows.
That's how most of these cases get started to begin with.
Yeah. And, of course, we know that fellows nowadays has nothing to do with sex, right?
Not at all.
Well, except for sex. Yeah, so here we are. And Tom Fisher, I'm afraid, is finding the truth in the old axiom that if you want to play it safe, when there's a controversy, if you want to play it safe, sit on the fence. But that's not correct, because if people are throwing rocks and you sit on the fence, they're going to throw rocks at you from both sides. So we have Tim Rohr coming along and saying, what are you doing, Tom Fisher? This is something that should be decided by the legislature. Tim is solid anti-abort from the very word go. He's been a frontline fighter going way, way, way back, right? Tim is very much anti-abortion. And then we have famous quotations. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. Vanessa Williams, who's saying, we don't need no stinking law. We don't need no stinking legislative submission. When did it become okay for all of the people to decide for a woman what she should do with her own body? And then, if that weren't enough, Calamity Jane Flores, so pro-abortion that she's been carrying the abortion banner for the most pro-abortion governor in probably the whole United States of America, none other than Lou, let him die on the operating table, Leon Guerrero, our governor. She was so involved, Jane Flores was so involved that she lured Kaneshiro and Radu to come out here briefly, long enough to get admitted to practice on Guam so they could be plaintiffs in the suit to enjoin the injunction dealing with chemical abortion on Guam, case before the district court. Jane Flores said, we shouldn't put this to a vote. This is a woman's rights. Since when do we start voting on rights? And I can't say I disagree with any one of the three. This is not a matter to throw up your hands and say, I'm going to let the people decide on this. Excuse me while I put my mask back on. So Fisher, today Fisher was kind of pinned the tail on the speaker today on that one, and he suggested pensiveness. I thought this over myself, and hack, calf, fap, you know. But
Kids, we can't afford to feed all of you, so I'm going to have to execute at least half. I feel really bad about it.
so he just said, well, I just thought that, I don't know. And then one other thing that I will report on that did come up. At the very beginning of the Q&A period, one of the Rotarians said, well, what if the law is that killing a baby in the womb is a crime? How do you handle that? Well, and the question was asked about 3 times, and Fisher abandoned his legal position and went to the philosophical. And he said, that depends on the determination of when life begins. Now, I was up front. I'm pro-choice. And I have to admit that I don't know when life begins, but our courts have always seen that the state has an interest in pregnancy before life begins, and that's why we came up with the first trimester in Roe, and that's why Casey changed that. It got rid of the 3 trimesters and said when the child can survive on its own, that's when life, and that's when the state's interest begins. And he kept going through that same thing, and that wasn't the question that was asked. I finally had to shoot off my big mouth, and I said, Tom, that's not the question. The question is this: if your referendum became law, given the current state of the law, our law on the books right now, that said that if you were to kill a baby in the womb with the right state of mind, it would be murder. What effect would your law have on that? No philosophy. And Fisher said it wouldn't work. In other words, it would not be murder because it's inconsistent with his law. So I don't think, and I could see why he wouldn't want to address this straight on, because if he does, because if you look at it straight on, that means that it's okay to kill a helpless human being and something that we've thought of as being murder. There is no limit on it whatsoever. And I think that really nicely illustrates exactly what we're talking about here. If Fisher's law became law. And then Fisher also said, he tipped his hat to Parkinson and said, well, his law is, his statute is basically the same as my statute, except it's not a legislative submission. If 8 people vote for it, it passes and goes to the governor. And he said that's fine with him. So in other words, Tom Fisher apparently is results-oriented. Doesn't matter to him if it's a referendum or a standalone bill, so long as we can take the lives of helpless, innocent, defenseless humans before they're born. It's kind of, apparently, my word's not his. For him, it's Mox Nix. So I still got a lot more work to do on this.
Oh, and I would like to, in the next round of this, bring up his inconsistency of his vaping bill, where he proclaims it's all about morality and saving children.
Yeah. And they dinged,
I don't think he has a foundation.
And they dinged him on his fentanyl bill, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some guys there that got some real potential. One of the questions was talking about the fentanyl bill, and the rap was, if fentanyl negligently causes harm to somebody, it's 20 years in prison. But purposely taking the life of a human in utero, no harm, no foul. How can that possibly be? And that's my going back to, it's not logical, invent your own language. I'm going to invent some, well, I'm going to copy this language from somebody else and say goodbye to our president. Let's go, Brandon!
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Nearing a critical deadline. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates yesterday, and Fed Chairman Powell said Congress needs to raise the debt ceiling. This as President Biden and 4 top congressional leaders agree to meet next week to discuss the pending crisis.
Last week, House Republicans passed a bill that would raise the debt ceiling, but also limit future spending. President Biden has demanded a raised debt ceiling with no strings attached. Senate Republicans, including John Cornyn of Texas, said Wednesday the president needs to negotiate.
It's absolutely reckless, particularly when our economy is teetering, to take this unnecessary risk.
The Treasury Secretary said without an agreement, we may begin to default on our debts as early as June 1st. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
As for interest rates, the Fed raised its key rate by 1/4 percentage point in an ongoing effort to curb inflation.
Looking ahead, we'll take a data-dependent approach in determining the extent to which additional policy firming may be appropriate.
And those comments by Fed Chairman Powell sent stocks lower. The Dow lost 270 points. Hours after a gunman in Atlanta shot 5 women in a doctor's waiting room yesterday, police caught him. The suspect, 24-year-old Dion Patterson. Mayor Andre Dickens praising his quick capture.
We are able to bring this suspect into custody without further harm. He will be charged and stand trial for his crime.
Patterson's mother says he's a former Coast Guardsman who had some mental instability after taking some VA-prescribed meds. In Texas, deputies arrested the girlfriend of the man accused of killing 5 of his neighbors. Deputies say Divamara Lamar Nava helped the suspect hide. Prosecutors charged Francisco Oropeza yesterday with the 5 murders. Deputies also arrested one of the suspect's friends. America's listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the way. You never know who will drop in. Subscribe now on foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now.
A pandemic immigration policy is about to expire, but Senate Republicans are urging President Biden not to let that happen.
The pandemic-era Title 42 allows the U.S. to expel migrants at the southern border for public health reasons, and with it ending on May 11th, Senator Lindsey Graham has a strong warning.
Come next week, all